Hi, my friend. My name is Stephen Hewer. I founded the company Synergistic Nutrition. I wanted to just try and encourage you, if you're here because you have health challenges. I've been behind the 8 ball with my own health challenges starting when I was 15 years of age. And I figured I'd share my story so that you could understand that you don't have to give up. You don't have to resign yourself to live with a condition the rest of your life. You don't have to accept the allopathic traditional medical model route that treats symptoms, doesn't address causes. I get phone calls from various potential clients that over the years they got an appointment scheduled to have hip replacement surgery, have some other kind of surgery, and I try and educate them to make them aware that the body is a self-healing mechanism, and that if they give it time and they apply the dietary and supplement recommendations that I've discovered over the years, that they can only improve, and in most instances their bodies are able to heal whatever's going on. So I'm going to take a little bit of time here to just briefly recap my journey so that you can understand that even if you're really behind the 8 ball, that you don't have to give up hope. So, as I said, my journey began when I was 15 years of age, and so I received 2 large mercury fillings in one setting. That in 1976, when this took place, this is based on Dr. Hal Huggins, the famous late dentist that taught the problems with mercury toxicity from dental fillings and how to safely remove them. So what he said was that in 1976, the silver prices had gone up, and the dental profession saw it as a potential business challenge to increase the prices of their silver or mercury amalgam fillings. So they decided to remove the silver from the fillings and increase the copper content so that it was called a high copper mercury amalgam. Well, we know copper is used in our wiring to transmit electrical signals because it's the most conductive metal that you can economically use. And so this type of filling caused mercury to off-gas 50 times higher amounts than the previous kind of filling that was a silver mercury amalgam. And so I walked out of the dental office with these 2 new fillings with a sore throat developing, and went home, and the sore throat continued day after day after day, and finally my mom said, well, let's take you to the doctor. So we did. And in those days, you just take antibiotics, and so that's what happened. And after 10 days on the antibiotics, which is like 1 round, the sore throat had not gone away. So I was put on another round of 10 days of antibiotics, and by the end of that second 10-day period of time, the sore throat was gone. But my elimination stopped working. So for the first time in my life, never experienced this before, all of a sudden I wasn't eliminating. I mean, it was like it shut down by about 97%. So here I am feeling bloated and toxic because, when you don't eliminate, you're reabsorbing your own toxins into your bloodstream. And those toxins irritate your nervous system. So, when I was young, so I just felt very angry, very introverted, very concerned, and didn't know what to do and didn't know what had caused it. And the other thing is, I was raised in a home where, boys don't complain about any physical injury, or, if you get hurt playing football or whatever, you don't gripe and complain and whine because you're called a pussy. I kept it to myself for months and months and months, this chronic issue, and I wasn't able to eat as much. But in time, I told my parents, and, I was finally taken to the doctor, and barium enema was done. And I didn't get to see the x-ray at the time, but the doctor said that I was normal, and that if I had problems, I needed to take X-Lax. And so I go, I never needed that before. That doesn't seem like we're addressing the cause. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. So I didn't do that. And instead, I just ate very light. I switched over to being a vegetarian. So at that time, the vegetarian diet was conducive to less toxicity in my body, because when you don't have good transit time, you're experiencing the reabsorption of your own fecal matter toxins, and then that leads to all the conditions that I was experiencing. So bad breath, distended abdomen, always feeling very self-conscious because I wasn't clean inside, and I was feeling bloated. So my whole life socially sort of shut down too. My confidence went down to like 0. High school then became just tremendous effort, I was an athlete, and I couldn't do the things that I used to do athletically. I mean, I was like pretty coordinated, very athletic, and now I was sort of like, relegated to jogging is all and riding my bicycle, because I really didn't feel that sense of centeredness that comes from having a nice flat abdomen that's functioning fine. So social life was, distraught, and became more serious. Prior to that, I was pretty extroverted, pretty lighthearted. Anyways, that come forward to, all through my 20s, all through my 30s. I became a colon hydrotherapist for a brief window of time, so, I found relief from doing colonics. And, so come forward in time from, so about 4 years of this very stagnant, slow-moving, hardly anything coming out, elimination, very Spartan diet, hardly eating much because of to compensate for not eliminating. So I was always pushing myself. So whenever I get tired, low blood sugar, I just push myself, because, I was taught by my father that when you're fatigued, you just push yourself harder and you get the second wind, which for 4 years that worked. But then when I went to college at age 20, and there was a diet that was adopted by the Seventh-day Adventist church that I belonged to, that was called the Pritikin program, where they don't add any oils to the diet. So I went for 6 months with no oil in the diet, no olive oil, really no fats of any kind, mostly just fruit in my diet. So at the end of this 6 months of school, where I'm still bicycling on a regular basis, I'm still pushing myself whenever I get tired, just keep pushing myself, staying up, doing homework, preparing. I even gave a couple of sermons because I was studying to be a healthcare professional and a pastor. I finally woke up one morning feeling like a tank had rolled over my body in the middle of the night, and that I was had lost 50% of my energy. It was like I was unplugged. I lost all that focus and all that drive to study academically. I was just bewildered and no longer could be in school. So retreated back to mom's, stayed with mom, and then I went to work for a Seventh-day Adventist carpenter friend, and still, again, not able to eat much, so I'm always fatigued pretty quickly during the day. And at this lunch hour while on the construction site, I think it was the first day that I worked for him, I was ripping a 2x4, something you should not do, even if you're a skilled carpenter, apparently. But you hold the 2x4 that's only, 3.5 inches wide, you hold it with one hand, and you go with the grain instead of across the grain, which is very risky. And so I, did something very stupid, very foolish, and the thing kicked back, cut my left thumb off. It was hanging by a little piece of skin here, and was taken to the hospital and waited 3 hours. Finally, they sewed it back on, but I lost the ability to bend it, and it's deformed, but I still have it. So, but the blessing that came out of that was that I was now on workman's compensation. That workman's compensation was, I think, $240 a month. And that permitted me to have the funds to do a fast and a cleanse that I'd been reading about. So I had read this book and I wanted to do this, but didn't have the time because I had to work to make money. And now I didn't have to work. And so I did this 10-day juice fast where you take clay psyllium, so liquid clay, liquid bentonite clay, popularized by Victor Irons way back when. And you do a tablespoon of that for every 50 pounds of body weight. So I did a couple tablespoons into your diluted vegetable juice. In this case, it would be 2 times of the day I drink fresh pressed carrot juice, and then the 3rd time of the day at night I drink fresh pressed grape juice. And so I would dilute the carrot juice in some water, and I would go ahead and add the 2 tablespoons of the bentonite clay liquid, and then I would add a heaping teaspoon of psyllium powder, shake it up, it gels and becomes thick pretty quick, so you drink it down pretty quick. And I drink that drink 3 times a day, in addition to drinking generous amounts of fresh carrot juice, and then at night the fresh grape juice. On days 5 through 8 of this, all of a sudden I started to eliminate this tire rubber type fecal matter out of my intestines. And I started to feel really good. And then, nothing else came out after that. So it was like I got all this stuff out of my system, felt reborn. Then I adopted a vegetarian diet, trying to do raw veganism off and on for a while there. Went down to the Lemon Grove Optimum Health Institute, San Diego, California area. Lived there for about 6 weeks, worked there for a little while. But the goal was fruitarianism, because I'd read Johnny Love Wisdom's book, I'd read Maurice Croc's book, Fruit, the Food and Medicine for Man. I'd read Arnold Ehret's writings on the mucusless diet healing system, that he had found that the fruitarian diet was the ideal diet, in his opinion. And so that basically, I'm still dealing with this slow transit time, and I'm trying to heal myself. So I'm thinking, okay, that's the diet that's going to do it. So I kept on, trying to pursue that. finally did manage to make my way to Hawaii. And in 6 months of doing this diet, mostly fruitarian diet, I experienced the enamel of my teeth being eaten away, so that I was becoming extremely sensitive to anything hot, cold, or sweet. And then I bought a book by a dentist named Money by the Mouthful on how you could remineralize your teeth. And I followed his program and remineralized my teeth. Then still dealing with this on my early 20s now. Still dealing with this distended stomach, slow transit time, constipation problem. Didn't feel toxic anymore, no more bad breath, felt clean inside, and had some pretty good energy at times, but still not optimal. So, come forward in time to 1991. In 1987, I was inspired to do a correspondence course in nutrition from the American College of Naturopathy, and got my Naturopath degree, Bachelor of Science in Naturopath, in 1990. So come forward in 1991, I was working in the vitamin department of a health food store, and a girl working next to me in cosmetics insisted, because I always was compensating for my slow transit time constipation with herbal laxatives, and you lose a lot of water when you use herbal laxatives, so that meant that my lips were chapped almost all the time. So she was tired of seeing my lips chapped, insisted I use a lip balm that apparently was a community lip balm that everybody in the store, quite a few people in the store, apparently had used. So I used it. So on the very next day, in the area where I had a cut on my lip, I developed a blister and a fever. And I became ill enough that I couldn't work, and for a week I was out of work dealing with this blister, with this fever and extreme fatigue. I come back to work after a week and I'm extremely tired. I don't know what's going on and can't figure it out, and I'm staying up till about 10:30 every night trying to nourish a new relationship with a lady. And so I was staying up longer than I should have, but within a few weeks of that, 4 weeks, about a month, I developed like even worse sore throat, and I started coughing up blood. So I, working in the vitamin department, I was doing vitamin C and I was doing echinacea and the things that, I knew to do for immunity and stuff, and nothing was affecting this. So I went to a holistic medical doctor in the vicinity, and he did blood tests and came back with the diagnosis that I had high titers to herpes, cytomegalo, and Epstein-Barr. They're all 3 herpes viruses. And that I had adrenal insufficiency, and so I had chronic fatigue syndrome. So I knew that, the adrenal thing came from my exhaustion that I went through for 4 years of veganism, and then 6 months of no oil in the diet and starving myself for 4 years. So I knew that was adrenal exhaustion. I had injured my adrenals way back when I was 20, and that I was prone to this adrenal problem. So now it was confirmed by diagnosis, and I asked him, what do I do for it? He said, there's no known cure. And so I said, well, okay, I'm gonna find one. And so my journey began, where for the next 4 years, I was just deteriorating from the effects of this infection. I started to lose my hair. So within 4 years, it became so sparse that, I had to basically shave it off at one point. But, it's prior to that, I wouldn't have lost my hair. This was purely when your body is dealing with something more life-threatening, it will, take the energy that it needs from other parts of the body to deal with that. So in this case, to fight the herpes, cytomegalo, Epstein-Barr viruses, to always suppress them so they can't express. And so that sucks away from everything else, including your libido, reproductive health, your, cosmetically, so your hair can go. In my case, my hair went. So by the 4th year of this saga with the herpes infection problem, I had learned about dark field microscopy and started to take a course. I took a course in looking at blood in its live state under a microscope and in dark field. And that was, I learned according to Enderlein, Gunther Enderlein, a famous zoologist in Germany that redefined how you look at blood and what the components are that you're seeing and what they are. And so I found that very fascinating, and taking some of those isopathic remedies started to improve my health for the first time in this 4-year time period. And so I got really interested in this subject, studying it further, studied all about Royal Rife and his discoveries, and continued to basically deepen my knowledge of the complexities of human physiology, uncovering secrets that to that point I didn't know, and helping people, doing dark field blood analysis and showing them what I'm seeing, and then making recommendations in terms of supplements and things. And it was in 1994 that I was introduced to what's called the primal diet, that was about eating raw meats, that struck my curiosity, because I noticed that whenever I ate meat rare, I felt better, like there was an energy transfer that I got that I didn't get if it was well done. So another 2 years goes by, I take another ed training in the dark field microscopy from the same teacher. Some of the same students showed up. The subject came up again regarding this eating of raw meats and how this one particular tennis instructor had experienced such a profound improvement in his health from being on this diet. So I got back and I finally decided to try this diet. And it definitely improved my health. So it was like this chronic fatigue problem diminished. All of a sudden I was supporting my adrenals more, I had more energy, I felt better, but still had the constipation issues. And this was like eating red meat would, cause constipation. And I'd always have to compensate with my herbs or, in this case, something like oxy powder. So come forward to 1997. Now I take another training and I learned from Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt all the symptoms of mercury toxicity. I discovered that I have all those symptoms, 97% of them, and that, all the stuff that I did previous to try and detox mercury after I had my fillings replaced. So in 1991, when I had that herpes infection, shortly thereafter, I was instructed I needed to remove my mercury fillings, so I did. And something started happening from that I'll get to later, but I did homeopathic mercury detox under the guidance of a chiropractor who used electrodermal screening to test my body for mercury levels. And after every week going back to him for a week, every week for 6 weeks, I went back to him and he'd test me again, tell me where I was at, and give me a new homeopathic remedy in which I'd take for the next week. And after 6 weeks, he said mercury is no longer a burden based on my electrodermal screening testing device, which I found out in 1997 was absolutely false from this training that I took, where I learned about the mercury toxicity symptoms. So I still had candida problems, I still had a coated tongue, I still had fungus growing underneath my armpits on my arm hairs. I definitely had candida. And candida is associated with mercury toxicity. Whenever you have mercury toxins in the tissues, the candida is going to grow in that vicinity. And some people say that it's helping to bind it to the yeast or the candida so that it can't toxify or injure the tissues. I don't agree with that. I mean, if that's the case, I think it's a combination of things, which would be that it's actually bonding to the tissues, the sulfur amino acids in the tissues. It does injure the tissues. The tissues end up not being able to metabolize glucose into energy efficiently, so they produce more lactic acid and they produce a localized acid pH where the mercury deposits, and that localized acid pH lowers the oxygen levels, and then that's what causes the fungus to grow or the candida to grow. So I get back from this training and the instructions were to use DMPS and DMSA to detoxify. These are synthetic man-made sulfur amino acids, and that DMPS was a liquid that you inject into your veins, which was supposed to get it, I think, out of the nervous system. I'm not certain if I'm recalling that correctly, but I think it was to get it out of the nervous system more so than other parts of the body. So I did that every month, once a month for 4 months, and I gave myself the shot, a very large amount. I think I did 5 cc's in each shot. And, I was really tired after I got each shot. So for like 2 weeks, I was more chronic fatigued than normal. So at the end of the 4 months, I then switched over to doing DMSA, and this is encapsulated, and I was doing generous amounts of that each time. So once a month for 5 months, I did 3 grams of DMSA encapsulated. So when I was at the end of this period, basically at the 9th month, on the 9th dosage of these cumulative of 2 products I took over 9 months, I had taken the capsules of DMSA and was driving from a vacation where I was with family, and they were snow skiing in Mammoth Mountain, and I was driving back through Yosemite Valley, and I'd taken my DMSA before the trip. And then when I finally got home, I remember having the urge to defecate. I get on the toilet, I have an elimination, and it's like, wow, that was the most normal peristalsis, the most normal stool formation, the most normal elimination I'd had in 24 years. So I realized at that moment that my intestinal health and my transitory, stool formation and transit time had improved by about 75% from finally getting that 9th dosage. And my nightmare was beginning to end, and I was like so thrilled. I mean, I was like going, wow, finally, I now understand empirically and experientially what has been going on. So I continued with natural mercury detox instead of the DMPS, DMSA, because DMPS, DMSA they make weak ionic bonds with the mercury, so when they grab it and they are transiting through your bloodstream to the kidneys or liver, the bond can become broken and they can redeposit elsewhere in the tissues and redistribute it somewhere else. So and also because I had 2 weeks of fatigue after doing either one of these products, it was a pretty pronounced fatigue in addition to my already existing fatigue. And I knew that the kidneys were being asked to do the majority of the work, or a larger percentage of work than they're designed to do, to detox the mercury, and I was potentially injuring my kidneys. So I wanted to avoid that and go on with using natural chelators, which I did. So over the next 5 years, I continued to do mercury detox, and I would do testing with doctor's data where you do a challenge test with some DMSA, you take some capsules of that, you collect your urine for 24 hours, and then you send a specimen of that off to the lab. They do an analysis for your heavy metal levels. And I was still always off the chart high in mercury for all those years. So come about 7 years into this detox work and trying to rebuild the nerves in my gut to regain normal peristalsis, I had achieved about, I'd say, an 80 to 85% normal transit time, but my mercury burden was still very high. So I moved out here to South Carolina, from California to South Carolina, and I stopped paying attention to my heavy metal levels coming out of my urine. I stopped doing the testing, and I just figure, I'm going to just continue to do the natural products to chelate. And so finally I was introduced to Green Meadow Whey, the whey protein, from an inventor friend of mine that I got to know in 2010. I learned all about how whey protein, if it's not heated, if it's not damaged with heat, that you end up getting nature's richest source of the sulfur amino acid cysteine. So cysteine is the rate limiting amino acid that the body needs to produce more glutathione. And that glutathione is the body's master antioxidant that is required in large amounts by every single cell to protect the cell from free radicals and to detoxify the cell of toxins. So as I learned about the value of whey protein and I was taking Green Meadow Whey, I kept on learning and kept on teaching others, and I got customers call in to tell me that they'd had heavy metal detox success stories. Very impressive results just from being on the whey, and pretty quickly. And I even had one lady that worked for me, Rita, who earlier in her life had taken Prozac for a situational depression that evidently is stored in her body. And so when she got on the whey, she'd been on only like a couple of weeks. She finally started to take it every day. She was only doing it, I think it was like once a day or once every other day, and she finally increased it to like every day and even twice a day, I think. And all of a sudden she started to have a healing crisis where she was like wiped out, bedridden, massive headaches, and she was experiencing discharge from her eyes and her ears. And she went through this for several days, and finally at the end of this discharge and stuff and headaches, all the headaches were gone. She felt really good, and her mood was all positive, and she was like totally a different person. And I maintain that's because she successfully raised her glutathione from being on Green Meadow Whey, and then the body detoxed the stored Prozac and whatever other toxins they were, and the fact that she had the headaches and the discharge out of the eyes and the ears was indicative that her brain was the area that needed to detox, and the Prozac is the thing that's affecting and storing potentially in the brain. So I'm on this whey protein powder for 5 years, and I decide to redo a heavy metal challenge test, where actually it's not a challenge, but you do a heavy metal test where you send in blood, urine, and hair. And then it's looking for mercury levels in parts per billion, I think, which is higher than parts per million, and I think other companies look for parts per million, and this was like parts per billion, so you're looking even more carefully and more thoroughly. And it came up 0. There was 0 mercury showing up in any of those tissues. And so that was like, wow. So finally I've got rid of my mercury burden that I've had for all these years. This test has confirmed it. My symptomology indicates it. I don't have candida in my coated white tongue. I haven't had that for years. No more yeast growing under my armpits. So very excited. So then, because of the raid the FDA did on my premises in California in 2005, there was legal action they took against me 3.5 years later. That took many years to process and go through. And then I saw the writing on the wall. They weren't interested in common law, constitutional, individual rights, where there has to be an injured party. for there to be a crime. Instead, they were operating on admiralty law, that basically we've got all these rules and laws, you're on our turf. Statute code is what they call it. So if you violate their statutes, they're going to prosecute you, even if there's no injured party. So in my case, I hadn't paid taxes for a number of years, which because I set up my business as a corporation sole, and I was taught by legal counsel, and a bunch of us did this, that this is a way for you to operate your business as a charity, and to not have to be responsible for income tax or sales tax. And since I know the truth about that subject, I know that it's been a criminal action, that the income taxes are a criminal activity that the government's been forcing upon the American population for a long time. Prior to 1913, when the Federal Reserve Act was instituted. For the first 125 years of this country's existence, the government had the financing that it needed through tariffs and other means that I'm not aware of, I'm sure, where they didn't tax the citizenry. And that was one of the Founding Fathers' principal things, is to not be able to tax people on their income. So the IRS didn't see it the way that I did, which is that legally I was not paying taxes, just like these 1,000 other people or so that did the same thing I did. And they prosecuted me on that, and they prosecuted me on selling a controlled substance, which was the Cocoon GH oral growth hormone spray, which they told me was legal to sell. And then when it became popular, they decided to make it illegal. So after they raided me in July of 2005, a month later I contacted the FDA office, just some local office, asked them the question. I said, other people are selling this oral growth hormone supplement product that I'm a nutritionist. I want to know if it's legal for me to buy and resell. And the officer that was on the phone said, it's interesting you should ask that question, because 2 weeks ago we had a staff meeting on this topic. And because you're taking it orally by mouth, it is legally in the category of a dietary supplement. So yes, it's fine for you to take or to buy and resell. So that was a month after the raid, right? So I knew the whole thing was just a big charade. I knew that they were totally illegal in what they were doing, but whatever. I had to go through the whole journey. And so I'm here in South Carolina, 3.5 years after the raid. They finally decide to prosecute. They don't do the courtesy of sending you a summons to appear. Instead, they just did a, U.S. Marshals show up behind your vehicle, pull you over one day, and they take you off to jail and go through the trauma of that experience. So on the other side of being in prison for 9 months, I wanted to clean up my body and get as strong as I could, and I was inspired by Lou Corona. And Lou Corona is a 68 or something year old man nowadays who's got a lot of vitality, looks very young still, very strong, exudes a lot of positive energy, and I go, I want that, So I decided to try his diet. And so for 4 months I did high amounts of almond milk, green vegetable juice, and nuts and seeds that had been soaked and germinated and then pureed with water and cultured with a probiotic into a nut seed yogurt. And that was a diet that wasn't satisfying me, but the idea was that my body would somehow become acclimatized to it and adapt, and I would somehow become efficient at using the proteins and amino acids and fatty acids in these foods and become sustained. But at the time I was compensating by doing the green metal way too. But at the end of 4 months, drinking this green vegetable juice almond milk combination, I experienced my heart started to race on me. And all of a sudden I started to have diarrhea and loose stools. And this was wouldn't stop. And so I, found out later that I developed a hyperthyroid condition, that had occurred because I was eating foods high in oxalates, and oxalates are like little tiny spears of glass under the microscope, and they will puncture holes in your intestines if your body's not robust in being able to break these things down or bind them so they can't injure you. So I went through that whole nightmare of 5+ years of hyperthyroidism symptoms that were very severe. Now on the other side of it, I'm about 95 to 97% normal in my symptomology. So I'm still not 100% there, but I'm so much better. You could say that, I kind of turned the corner. But all this story to basically, inspire you, the listener, to realize that you can have, the most complex and the most severe of challenges, and yet it's all fixable. It's all healable. During that 5-year time period, from 2016 to 2017 to 2018 to 2019, I had breast and prostate cancer every single year because your immune system is so messed up from the autoimmune hyperthyroid thing that it can't take care of finding the tumor cells and getting rid of them. They're just naturally occurring in your tissues. And so I got rid of it naturally every time, but then it would come back a year later. So then in 2019, when the breast cancer came back, I discovered these peptides and read all this research on peptide therapy and used one particular peptide and injected it into the musculature of my breast because the tumor was right on the nipple. And I did that every 3 days or so. And I think it was in about 10 days to 2 weeks, all the nipple abnormality was gone, totally normal, and hasn't come back. So, and then the prostate thing, I'm learning things about that because that can come back problematic every year or so, can enlarge and become problematic. And so I'm learning things that fix that as well. And that's way better right now. So that's in really good shape compared to what it was. So having been through what I've been through and overcome as much as I have, and along the way helped clients experience various, sometimes dramatic resurrections of their health, you should be inspired and take hope that if you have any health challenge, you can, in most instances, heal it 100% or improve it dramatically such that you don't have to live a life of misery and suffering. And to use nutrition rather than surgery, and to use the right testing to determine what's going on. So at this point in my practice and in my career, I'm now able to offer some wonderful, insightful testing. So from, whether it's vitamin D levels you're looking at, whether it's looking for your SNPs, your single nucleotide polymorphisms, which is just looking at your genetic deficiencies. Basically from swabbing the inside of your mouth, you can get some mouth cells, some mucosal cells on a cotton swab, and you send it off to a lab, and then they're going to genetically test your DNA to see what particular genetic weaknesses you have, undermethylation, overmethylation, or whatever. You can do the OAT test, which is the organic acids test, which determines to pretty darn accurate degree what kind of acids are being produced by the microbial population in your gut. So you can see the candida, the evidence of the candida overgrowth in your gut from the organic acids test. And then, take appropriate action with getting rid of the candida, eating the right diet, taking the proper probiotics and all that. Now I can offer cholesterol testing, can offer thyroid testing in terms of your iodine levels. It's called the iodine loading test. So there's a variety of testing that I can now offer to more accurately see into your biochemistry imbalances so that we can be on track with more accurately determining what's the best course of action. And also I developed what's called the 11 Pillars of Health program. So for those of you who prefer to figure this all out yourself, who are not inclined or don't have the finances to pay for a consultation fee, to pay for the various testing procedures, there's 11 basic pillars that, when they're applied to your body and your life, bring about a dramatic improvement in your health to potentially complete resolution of whatever your issues are. And I'll be, making that available through a series of emails. So I recommend you sign up for my email newsletters so that you can keep up with all the discoveries that I'm getting wind of. So I'm available Monday through Friday. Currently, the hours of operation are 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And I do pick up the phone on my own these days. So feel free to call, and you'll probably get me. And if not, you'll get my voice message because I'm on another call with somebody else. But I'll call you back. And I generally give 20 minutes of my time to someone who needs to, ask questions and get answers about products or about their health. And I tend to, give pretty good advice on what to do, and then also send you something physically in writing with regards to the supplement, time of day to take it, how much to take, how long to take it, that kind of thing. And that's no charge. So for those who are trying to economize, that is a way for you to get something going. And what I've found is that when you actually take action in the direction of, saying, I trust natural law, I trust God's creation and all the natural things that are here to be my medicine, then, and you act from confidence and certainty that, you know, you're being guided by higher forces, by higher benevolent God forces, that, you know, if you take one step forward looking for the answer, then you're met with, you know, someone or some information that comes your way that will answer that question and help you to take the next step. Okay, consider me your partner in health. Thanks for your attention.